But it's a great honor to have been invited to attend this meeting, and it's an even more humbling honor to be invited now to reflect on these presentations and conversations, spanning a range of fields from glaciology to psychology, and a range of experience from that of a 96-year-old oceanographer to that of a 30-year-old advocate for street workers who is not here right now. But just what an amazing array of humanity we've had on display here. As a generalist, and I am a generalist, although I've been a science writer for 31 years, I'm going to present a general reaction to information I've heard. I'm not an expert in the sense of having dived completely deeply into the technicalities of the issues that have been presented, but I've been around long enough. I've written about global warming since 1988, so I've seen a lot of cycles of information come and go, and it gives me some insights. And what I like to do is call on the something that Murray Gell-Mann, a Nobel laureate who's not here today, but who I'm sure many of you know, he used to talk about when you're facing a complex problem, the thing to do is to step back a little bit, and he uses the phrase to take a crude look at the whole, a crude look at the whole. And that's all I can offer, because, which I think has some use. He actually has an acronym for that, CLAW, C-L-A-W, so it's a nice way to remember it. Yeah. In convening experts from across so many disciplines, Chancellor Sorondo and the other organizers have beautifully reflected the realities underpinning our species' challenge. At the dawn of an era of Earth history that is increasingly under our sway, that Pope Francis chose today to meet with us reflects his passion for harmonizing human relations and our relationship with this living planet, too. In this focus, the Pope is building on a foundation laid by St. Francis, who, as several people here noted to me, called creatures and creation kin. So here, where are we right now? Where are we at this point? Humanity, in essence, is in a race between potency and awareness. And weirdly, the same technological capacity that's given us the potency to fill the atmosphere with carbon dioxide and move around the world at jet speed has also given us some of the capacities to monitor and observe and understand our changes. So technology cuts in two directions. There's some great promise in some new technologies that I'll talk about in a minute. But the outcome of this race between our potency and our awareness will determine the quality of our species' journey and leave an indelible mark, for better or worse, it's up to us, on the planet that we inhabit. A few years ago, I proposed that we are essentially experiencing puberty on the scale of a planet. So at the species scale, we're going through that same kind of groping transition you go through when you move from teenage years to adulthood. I think it's a pretty good analogy. It kind of holds together. Global trends echo that awkward and sometimes damaging transition from teenage-style ebullience to the more measured norms of adulthood. It's kind of like shifting from a sprinter's running style to a marathon. And that's, transitions are hard, and I think we're starting to go through it, and we may trip and fall. The question is, can you not fall down completely? And I think there's a good chance we can work things out. Just as a teenager resists calls from elders to grow up, societies only naturally have been initially resistant to scientists' warnings of all this gloom and doom stuff. You probably remember when you were a kid, some parent or some teacher doing this. And you remember the feeling of resistance to that kind of signal. So to me, it's been very normal to have society, to have all of us sort of be uncomfortable and resistant to information, despite its being grounded empirically, powerfully in data and observations of change. So science, though, the limits of the physical and natural sciences have become kind of clear. I've been writing about the IPCC reports since before there was an IPCC. I don't think anyone in this room expects a new IPCC report 5 years from now to somehow magically make society go, oh, now we get it. It's harder than that. And I think that basically those sciences have done their job. The social sciences, similarly, have done an amazing job in recent decades of revealing empirically, with power, why we are the way we are, why we react to some risks. We overreact to some things. And as to the categories of risk that Martin Rees talked about, we underreact, we underinvest. I'll give you one quick anecdote. It's not in my notes. Sorry, interpreters. I had to try to write this out for the translators. I met a couple of astronauts a few years ago, almost 10 years ago, who were very concerned about the next asteroid that will swing by and hit the Earth. And they feel we are underinvesting, and it's not an expensive proposition to improve the telescopes with which we look for those asteroids. There's some we'll never see because they come from the sun. And they went to the Senate in the United States. They gave compelling testimony. Rusty Schweikert from the Apollo program and Ed Lu from the Space Shuttle program. And Rusty told me after the hearing, the Senate staff came up to him and they said, "We're very sympathetic to your needs and your argument for investing more in this, but there's no way we can do it because the next time my senator is up for re-election, he'll be ridiculed as kind of a space cadet." And that's that disconnect. I think that Professor Rees was getting at. We have this political inability to deal with some of these risks in a way that actually the data show you are clear. So some of this is political, some of it's sociological, a big chunk of it is behavioral. We're a new species, we have habits and traits and reactions that are largely a function of our here and now history as a species. We're brilliant in many ways, but we're stuck with our reptile brain within that bigger brain. So what do we do? What do we do? The social sciences have kind of helped to give us a sense of a way forward, but we haven't really always been eager to listen to those things because you hear a lot about climate denial, meaning people who deny the climate science, but I've seen a lot of denial of the behavioral sciences as well. People just don't want to hear that we're sort of stuck, that we have traits that are in the way, that it's not just disinformation, that actually it's partially us. So this all leads me to think more and more after 30 years of science writing and some broader writing on policy. And again, think about the things we've heard here, especially in the last couple of days after the basic physical sciences were explored. The science lays out the options, but science doesn't tell you which to choose. And that's a really important thing that gets lost sometimes. Scott Barrett got at this in some comments earlier. The science, David Hume, I never got a degree in philosophy, but actually a climate scientist led me to David Hume's thinking on an is and an ought. Science is the is, and everyone else gets to choose the ought, the values thing. So this is why the Catholic Church and institutions like it, with global reach, with the ethical framework and its social justice teachings, and as with all great religions, the ability to reach hearts as well as minds can play a valuable role in this century. And it's great, that's why it's great that this meeting has been convened by the church, the two academies together particularly. And it's particularly true for these kinds of global planet scale problems like global warming, those characteristics that make it such a wicked issue, make it all the more an issue where the sciences can kind of do their part, but we still have to figure out the rest ourselves as people and as communities. In a prismatic way, those gathered here have made the compelling case that it's a combination of knowledge, of data, faith, will, and love that will determine the quality of the human journey in this century. Yes, love, that word has actually been uttered here before. It's not the first time in this meeting. More on that in a moment. While choices are shaped by values, values are shaped by upbringing and experience. And that means this gets to the optimistic part of, at least for me, where we're at. The fact that experience can change you means that there's room for positive change, particularly through commerce and ideas and information, which is, of course, my realm, communication. As Nancy Knowlton explained in the context of the ailing oceans, the revealed connections between causes and effects, together with empathy and a menu of solutions, can spark shifts in behavior. But there's another hard part. The commitment to remain true to a choice, once you've made that choice, to pursue it through thick and thin requires more than values. It's a function of individual and communal will as well. That was the word that Archbishop Minerath aptly applied to this yesterday. Will. You have to stick with these things. They're not quick solutions. The research and ideas presented here revealed another important reality. Given the variegated nature of cultures, worldviews, and conditions around the world, it's clear that humanity will follow many paths in the decades ahead. This is not going to be really easily solved as a top-down kind of thing. The variegation around us really makes that clear. Calls for global and enforceable standards are creditable, but face huge hurdles. Just consider Professor Zamani's point in a conversation with Jeff Sachs, I think it was the first day, about the many different forms of ethics in different countries. You know, the idea of a global ethic has a beautiful feeling to it, but how do you actually have a common ethical conversation when there's so many different vantage points around the world? Another reality is that global and environmental social challenges are not the work of a single generation. This is not a one-time fix. This was the case in 2009. President Obama was elected. Ban Ki-moon said, let's seal the deal. That was the year. But unfortunately, the climate problem is not of the category that can be solved by one president or even one secretary general, one generation. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, I've written before about that the world needs something kind of quirky. We need a combination of urgency and patience. Can you be patient and urgent at the same time? I think in a way that's kind of what we need to do. And again, these questions, the last 5 minutes I haven't really said something about science. This is really about human nature and things broader than science. Navigating these questions can lead you into a state of feeling sapped and paralyzed, but in these sessions I've seen abundant basis for optimism, empowerment, and most importantly, action. There was Gretchen Daly's many examples of successful efforts to incorporate previously unmeasured values of living resources into decision-making at many levels, from the farm to the company to national. Ramanathan's extraordinary work, grounding atmospheric science in the sooty kitchens of Himalayan villages, shows you the potential to apply knowledge on several different levels at the same time. And at Pace University, where I teach, we really focus on that. So many other people do as well. There was Dan Kammen's description of university students' efforts to convince boards of trustees that true fiduciary responsibility transcends a strictly financial calculation of a university's return on its investments. The most important merit, to me, the most important merit of this focus on climate-related divestment isn't so much about pressuring Exxon or something. It's about engaging in that conversation about the word endowment. What is the endowment? Is it just the stocks and bonds, or in the 21st century, is it bigger than that? Finally, well, I'm going to cut to the chase because I want to stay on time. I've got less than 2 minutes. My personal enthusiasm derives mainly from the work of people like Antonio Batro on expanding educational opportunity with a mix of online tools and novel teaching practices. I spend more than half of my day online with part of my brain out in the bigger world, and we're going to be in that realm whether or not we like it going forward, and certainly the next generation is as well. And those tools offer unbelievable possibilities, along with the complications of the Facebook owners and stuff like that. But it's a great potential tool for sharing and shaping ideas that can make a huge difference in this kind of situation. There are factions who are going to fight against all this, as we just are seeing right now in Nigeria with this horrific kidnapping by an extremist group of 200 or more girls because they're in school. That's why they're being kidnapped. Now they're threatening to sell them into slavery. Just unbelievable. And so that push is there, but I think we can dominate, and I don't mean Western society, just the world can find a way forward more than it can fall backwards in these kinds of situations. We're building what Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit priest in the early 20th century, and a Russian geochemist, Vernadsky, together, a chemist and a Jesuit scholar, came up with the idea of noosphere, the Greek word for planetary mind. And what we're doing now with technology is we're building that. We're building that capacity. But of course, you have to use it. You have to use it with intentionality, or you're just going to be selling hamburgers. And that's not going to solve the world's problems. So finally, I want to get back to that word I mentioned, the L word earlier. It says much to me that even some of the most accomplished scientists at this meeting articulated that progress on climate, energy, equity, education, and conservation will be driven by values and faith more than data and predictive models. In a discussion over dinner, Walter Munk, at 96, one of the great oceanographers of modern times, spoke not of gigatons of carbon or megawatts of electricity. He said, "This requires a miracle of love and unselfishness." Bravo, Walter.